I think Eddie Hearn is pretty much trolling Deontay Wilder at this stage. To me, it looks like he's trying to get his own back on Deontay for all the things Deontay said about him and said about Anthony Joshua over the past couple years. And look, all's fair in love and war. I'm not knocking Eddie Hearn for doing what he's doing right now. But when he trolls somebody, it can be a little more subtle than when someone like Deontay Wilder is criticizing or trolling him. And, Wilder doesn't really troll people. He just insults people because that's how he truly feels. It's not necessarily trolling. He's not necessarily trying to wind him up. But anyway, Eddie Hearn has said that Deontay Wilder probably won't get to fight for a world title again until 2022 onwards. So 2022 at the earliest. And he says he doesn't understand why somebody wouldn't take the rematch with Tyson Fury. Obviously, two of his top heavyweights, Anthony Joshua and Dillian Whyte, took their immediate rematches when both of them got beat. AJ against Ruiz, and of course Dillian Whyte against Povetkin. So he's shrugging his shoulders and scratching his head, and he's thinking, why isn't Deontay Wilder taking the fight? Again, I think it's kind of a passive-aggressive dig at Deontay Wilder. That's my interpretation of it. And as far as Wilder not getting a shot until 2022, I remember, I think it must have been last year sometime, Eddie Hearn basically saying that he wanted to freeze Deontay Wilder out if Deontay Wilder loses to Tyson Fury. Almost in a vengeful kind of way. And again, I'm not knocking him for that because Deontay Wilder has said similar things about Anthony Joshua in the past. And you could just see that Eddie Hearn was saying it with relish, like he can't wait to get back at Deontay Wilder if Wilder ends up in a position where he's no longer champion. The way Eddie Hearn came across is like he was saying Wilder deserves to get frozen out because of all the stuff that he's done and all the things that he's said. And maybe he's right. But personally, I like Deontay Wilder as a fighter. As a character, maybe not my cup of tea, okay? Especially over the past couple years. Prior to his beef with AJ, Wilder was a lot more palatable. But since his first fight with Ortiz, Wilder's ego just got so out of control that he became, I'm not sure how to describe it. I don't want to use there was a word I didn't want to use there because it's overused by certain sections of society. But yeah, let's just say his ego was out of control and it got a bit much. And at that point, Deontay Wilder, the character, became unpalatable for me. But as a fighter, all along, I've always liked him. And I would be disappointed if Deontay Wilder retired now. I'd be disappointed if Deontay Wilder faded away into obscurity. I would like to see him come back. I would like to see him in there with AJ. I'd like to see him in there with Andy Ruiz, with Dillian Whyte. I mean, there are so many fighters in the heavyweight division right now that would make really intriguing matchups with Deontay Wilder. The issue, and this was raised by G-Man in one of his recent videos, is Deontay Wilder's age, because I believe he's just turned 35. And for a fighter who really trades on his power, his speed and athleticism rather than technical ability, as your athleticism fades in your mid-30s, etc., that means Deontay Wilder is going to become a lot more vulnerable than he already was because his athleticism is going to fade. He doesn't have a solid technical base to fall back on. And therefore, it becomes very precarious for Deontay Wilder to continue boxing for much longer. When you add his injury issues on top of the fact that he's aging and he doesn't have technique to fall back on, that also is kind of an ominous sign for Deontay Wilder. So if he's going to come back, I really think he needs to come back in 2021. He needs to just go out there, take on whatever contenders he needs to take on to get himself into a mandatory position, and then maybe fight for a title in, as Eddie Hearn said, either back end of 2021 or 2022. Because AJ and Fury, if they both get through their next fights, are going to fight each other next year, and it's going to be a 2-fight deal. As long as the first fight is relatively competitive, then you have to imagine they're going to run it back immediately. And that will take up the majority of 2021. So yeah, assuming they manage to keep hold of all the belts, and that's a big assumption because in the heavyweight, well, in boxing now, there are 4 belts per division. So even if AJ and Fury have 2 fights next year, it doesn't mean it's going to be for the undisputed title. One of those belts, at least one of those belts, could go astray. And there may be an opportunity for Deontay Wilder to fight a different heavyweight for one of those belts. So we'll see what happens. But personally, as much as Deontay Wilder's personality and his character leaves a lot to be desired, as a fighter, he's provided us with some tremendous entertainment over the years. Some tremendous one-punch knockouts, a lot of thrills and spills. So I hope he comes back. I hope he gives it one last go. Because I still think there are plenty of heavyweights out there if Deontay Wilder is, still somewhere close to what he was prior to his rematch with Fury. There's a lot of fighters out there that Deontay Wilder could beat, if not be very competitive with and produce some very exciting fights with. So let's see what happens here. As I say, Eddie Hearn is not going to be in any rush to give Deontay Wilder an opportunity. I think he is being vengeful here, and I'm not dissing him for that, because Wilder and his team really and truly messed Eddie Hearn and Anthony Joshua, etc. around in many different ways. So Eddie Hearn's now returning the favor. I can't knock him. But from a boxing fan's perspective, that is a little disappointing, because I would like to see AJ fight Wilder. And Eddie Hearn hasn't ruled that fight out. Okay, at least not, ostensibly. But I do wonder whether his true intention is actually to try and freeze Deontay Wilder out and punish him for all the things that Wilder had previously said about him and about Anthony Joshua. And as I say, Wilder's probably going to have to go a different route, either force a title shot by becoming mandatory or fight for a different belt if that belt manages to make its way out of the Matchroom stable. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below about all the points I've raised in this video.